Hey everybody, my name is Lori Gooding. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. My recovery date is July 1st, 2001, and my home group is the Start Fresh group. We meet Mondays at 5:30 at a place called the Western Club in Oklahoma City. Hello, New Jersey. Good Lord, I feel like everybody is here. I thought a lot of people would leave. It's the Al-Anon, people would go take a nap or something. You are here. Hey, y'all. I want to thank Jimmy for asking Cliff and I to be a part of this weekend. I want to thank him. And not real sure at this very moment, but I think I want to thank him. And I want to thank Wendy for hosting me and for picking Cliff and I up from the airport. And she went and got me Smart Water because I'm a water snob. And so she went and brought me Smart Water, which I really appreciate. I drink a lot of water. Anyway, and I want to thank Anessa, my sponsee, who came up with us this weekend. It's always fun to have a girl with me. I say girl, she's a grown woman, but they're all my girls. It's a thing. And in the South, we can do that. So, y'all talk funny here, by the way. It was funny because one of my sponsees texted me this morning and she said, "Don't come home talking funny." And I was like, really? Because usually that's what people say about me. All right, let's get this started so I can get it over with. I was born. And when I was born, I had two older sisters and an older brother waiting on me. My older sister is 11 years older than me, and she has drank, smoked, taken something since I can remember, and she doesn't think she has a problem, and she doesn't think she's an alcoholic, and I got to be honest, I really don't think she is either, but she gives a good impression of one. And I have a sister that is 10 years older than me, and she came into the rooms about 10 years ago of AA. She came in the rooms 10 years ago, and about 7 years later, she called me crying. And I answered the phone, and she was crying, and I said, "What is wrong?" And she said, "I don't think I'm an alcoholic." And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Because I really want to be." And I said, "Well, what is going on?" And she said, "I feel like a fake and a fraud in those meetings." She said, "I don't relate to so much." And she said, "I went back through the steps with my sponsor again, and we went back through the book again to try to identify, and I don't identify. And my sponsor says, I cannot tell you if you're an alcoholic or not, but I'm going to make an exception in your case. You are not an alcoholic." And she's not. And I said, "Well, why did you go to AA in the first place?" And she said, "Well, if I'm being honest, I thought my husband would follow me into the rooms." And I said, "Welcome to Al-Anon." Then I have a brother that is 6 years older than me, and he died of this disease 3 years ago. And he died the alcoholic death that is described in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. My brother was 6'5", and on his deathbed he weighed 135 pounds. He was nothing but skin and bones, and he had drank himself. He had been drinking since he was way young teen, and he was 56 when he died. And And I learned to love my brother for who he was and what he was because of Al-Anon. Because for the majority of my life, I was trying to change him and fix him and trying to get him to do what I think that he should do to be the brother that I thought that I needed and that I wanted. And you people told me to love him where he was, and I did. And I am so grateful for that because the last words that he said on this earth was, he loved me. And I knew that he did, and he knew that I loved him. And we had some good conversations before he died, and I'm grateful for that. And then there's me, and I am the baby, and I have never drank or done a drug in my whole entire life. I know. I'll let it set in for you people. I made that decision at a young age. I'd seen what happened to my brothers and sisters when they drank and drugged, and it seemed like they got in a lot of trouble and caused a lot of problems, and I was not going to be like them. And so I just decided at a young age, and when I say young, I was like 6, and I was never going to do that, and I stuck to it. My husband would like to tell you I may not have had a drink, but I needed one. But and so I grew up in a non-alcoholic home. My parents are not alcoholics. I grew up with a good family and good morals, and taught us how to do right from wrong. And I grew up in a great home. I really did. My dad was the hardest working man I've ever met. My daddy was as old as everybody else's grandfathers my age. He was in World War II. He grew up during the Depression, and he taught us how to work hard. And if you could do anything, you could achieve anything if you just worked hard enough for it. And that's what I grew up believing. And so I had a good life. And then I turned 7. And when I turned 7, my parents got a divorce. And when my parents got a divorce, my mom moved me. We lived in the country at the time. We lived on 10 acres, and I was a country kid. And my mom moved me to a suburb of Oklahoma City, and I hated it there. And the reason why I hated it there is because it was so different from anything that I was used to. I mean, my closest neighbor was a mile and a half down the road, and now I could reach out and touch the house next door. It was bizarre. And then also, kids were mean to me for the first time. Kids teased me for the first time, and the reason why they did that is because I was the ugliest kid in school. I'm going to tell you what I look like. If you would like to see, my husband has pictures on his phone. He would be glad to share. But I had buck teeth really, really bad, and I had these eye teeth that were growing up out of my gums because my baby teeth wouldn't fall out, so I looked like a vampire bunny. Had this big nose. I got my nose fixed when I was in my 20s. My doctor said, your nose would look better on a man. I said, it does. It's my daddy's nose. It looks great on him, not so much on me. I had these big, thick glasses because I couldn't see 3 feet in front of my face. I had long, stringy hair. I was a tomboy. My brother had 2 older sisters, and by the time I was here, he wanted a little brother. He got me. He did the best with what he had. And so I grew up playing with boys. I have always been more comfortable with boys. I grew up playing football and racing cars and climbing trees and all the stuff. And I was just not real comfortable with the girls. And so I was a tomboy. I was not very hygienic, and so they had a lot to work with, is what I'm telling you. And so kids teased me, and they called me names, and they tripped me going down the hall at school, and they followed me home and threw things at me. And so what that taught me was, if you're going to hurt me, you're not going to get close to me. And so I was a latchkey kid. My mom would leave for work in the morning. I let myself in after school, and I stayed home after school, and I never left the house. I would watch TV and read books, and I just didn't have friends growing up. My decision, I just decided that was just going to be easier for me. And so my mom started going out. She didn't really want the divorce. She started going out on weekends, and at first it was no big deal. It was just like every other weekend when my brother would come over. And then it was every weekend, and then it just became more and more. And my mom would leave me by the time that I was, 10 years old. She would leave on a Friday to go to work, and I would not hear from her again until Monday morning when she would call me and tell me to get up and get ready to go to school. And that's just the way that it was at my mom's house. I had become the parent at my mom's house. I didn't realize that, but we'd had this slow shift, and what happened was I was cleaning the house, I was doing the laundry, I was fixing my own meals, and I was taking care of myself, and my mom was just coming in and out of the door. And what I know about that today is that I thought if I did all that stuff that my mom would stay home and I would see her more, and I was just trying to get her to be there. But that wasn't happening. And then things were different at my daddy's house. I'm a daddy's girl. I've always been a daddy's girl. I would go to my daddy's house on the weekend. He had this girlfriend who I hated, and we always went to her house. We always went to her house for dinner, and they hang out and they would do stuff together, and I felt like I was just there. I was just around my daddy, but didn't really spend any time with him. And that woman never did anything to me. I just hated her because she was my daddy's girlfriend. That's the truth. And then what happened was when I was 13, both of my parents got married within 2 weeks of each other. My dad married that woman I hated, and my mom married my stepdad. And things changed for me instantly, and my whole life got kind of turned upside down. One was because my stepdad decided that he was going to be the parent of our household, which I had taken over that role and was not wanting to relinquish. But he thought he could do a better job, and I'm going to tell you, I'm grateful that he did. He was very strict with me. I was a good kid, and I got in trouble all the time. I got in trouble for stupid stuff. I had rules and regulations, and I'm really glad that I had those now. I hated him for it at the time, but I'm really glad I had those now because he did a lot of good things for me. And he taught me a lot, and I want you to hear this. He was really good to me in a lot of ways. He got my teeth fixed. He got my contacts. He took me to buy store-bought clothes for the first time in my life because up until that time, I'd always had hand-me-downs or garage sale clothes. And he taught me a lot about the world. He was really smart, and And we always had this power struggle with and our whole relationship. We really did. But he taught me a lot, and he did a lot of good things for me. But what happened was, when I was 16 years old, I caught him watching me take showers through the skylight in the bathroom. And it was 11:30 at night, and I went and I'd caught him a couple of times before, but my mom wasn't home. And I was, and you're never, when that first starts happening, you're not really sure. And so what I did one night, it was 11:30 at night, my mom was home. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower and waited, and I heard him get on the roof. And I went and told my mom, and she came out of the room and waited for him to come down, and she heard him up there, and she asked him what he was doing on the roof at 11:30 at night, and he said he was cleaning the gutters. Which, if you think about it, it's a good time. There's no traffic. Nobody's around. 11:30 at night's pretty good time. No obstacles up there. So, I don't know if my mama believed him or not, but I can tell you this. I got asked to leave that house a few months later. And I know today that my mom, when my mom was going out on weekends, she wasn't going out because she was an alcoholic. She was not an alcoholic. She was going out to look for him, and she found him, and she could not lose him. And she was scared to death to lose that security. And so I got to go live with my dad, which I told you I love my dad. I'm a daddy's girl. I was really thrilled about that. When I got in this program, my sponsor asked me, she said, "Do you think that your stepdad was an alcoholic?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Why not?" She said, "Didn't he drink?" And I go, "Oh yeah, he drank every day." She said, "Well, tell me how he drank." And I said, "Well, he drinks beer like I drink water. He literally would buy it. We'd drive over to Texas because it was 1 point whatever, I don't know. Never drank, don't know about it. Anyway, some kind of alcohol point level. And he would bring it back in the cases. But anyway, and I said he drank beer like I drink water. And every night he would have a tumbler of Ezra Brooks and Coke, sometimes 2. And she said, "Why do you think he wasn't an alcoholic?" And I said, "I've never seen that man drunk." She goes, "How do you know you've never seen him sober?" Revelation. Seriously. I had no idea. What I know now is that he was probably an alcoholic. He was absolutely had all the isms of alcoholism. But I'm living with my dad, and I have learned to kind of like my stepmom at this time, and I'm kind of accepting her because she ain't going anywhere, and I'm living in her house. And so I'm trying to get along with her, and I'm trying to do the deal. The problem is that at the time, my dad is dying. We have a kidney disease that runs in our family. Oddly enough, it's polycystic kidney disease. And my dad has it. And I have it. My sister got a transplant 3 years ago. She has it. And he's dying at the time. And I know that he's dying. He's doing dialysis 3 times a week. And I do to him what I did with those kids. If you're going to hurt me, you're not going to get close to me. And I kept my daddy at a distance, and I kept really busy, and I avoided him at all costs because I know that when he dies, if I'm too close to him, it's going to hurt even worse, and I can't do that. And so once again, I think I'm in charge, and I think I'm in control, which is a pattern in my life that continues throughout my life. I always think I'm right. I always think I'm in control. I never make a mistake, and I never apologize. Those are my rules, and I live by those. And so I am. So I'm staying really busy. I'm scared to death my dad's going to die. I know it's going to happen. And the week of my high school graduation, my dad gets a kidney transplant from his twin sister and saves his life. And our relationships changes on a dime, and I allow my dad to be a part of my life, and he allows me to be a part of his. And I get to hear about growing up in the Depression. And yes, they walked uphill in snow both ways. It's a true story. Which is weird because we don't even really get snow in Oklahoma. But apparently, during the Depression, there must have been a lot of it. Anyway, and so everything's going really good. I'm living with my dad. I graduate high school. I get a job at a bank right down the street. I come home for lunch. I spend a lot of time with my dad. We spend a lot of time in the summer together. We have a house on a lake. We go fishing all the time and run trot lines. And I'm having a good life. I turn 19 and I meet him. And my daddy hated him. And I met him in September. I was 19. He was 27. I met him in September. He asked me to marry him in November. And we got married in March. Did I tell you my daddy hated him? Hated him. I mean, my daddy didn't like him the whole time I was married to him. I'm just going to tell you, he wanted, never mind. He did not like him. And you know, I was 19. I don't know what you were like at 19. I knew everything. And people tried to tell me I was making a big mistake, but I think I know better because I'm always right. I'm always right. So I got married. I instantly know this is the biggest mistake of my life, but if you're somebody like me, you cannot admit that because I don't ever admit I'm wrong. And I just think if you work hard enough, you can achieve anything. And so I'm just going to do that. So I tried to make this marriage work on my own is basically what happened. And it was a total wreck. And I was miserable, and I think he was miserable even though he didn't think he was. But I'm just telling you, I don't know how anybody could have been happy in that marriage. It was just not fun. And so we had a baby, because if you have a bad marriage, bring a kid into it. That's always beautiful. So I have my son, and I'm just miserable. And we'd been married about 7 years, and I was looking for a way out of that marriage. And I don't know where this comes from, but there's only certain reasons why you can get a divorce. Here's the reasons. They have to beat you. He did not. They have to cheat on you. He did not. Or he has to be an alcoholic. He was not. Had he been an alcoholic, we might still be married. I'm just saying. Anyway. And so I don't know how to get out of this marriage. And I've told you, I grew up with morals. I knew right from wrong, and I had some rules, and I knew that I couldn't just leave. And now I have this baby, and I don't know what to do. By this time, I'm living back in the country again with him, and I'm driving to the city every day for work. And I'm working in a bank. It's an hour's drive every day. And I'm working in a bank in the city, and I'm looking for a way out of my marriage. And he walks through the door. And he was the best-looking thing I've ever seen. He was 5'6". I don't know what it is. I like short guys. If you're short, I'm going to like you. If you're short and alcoholic, I'm going to love you. And he was 5'6". He had this dark brown hair, these baby blue eyes, this great smile. He always had these great suits and these great ties, and he was the attorney for the bank. He was on my board of directors, and he was on my loan approval committee. And every time that he walked in the door, all the girls would giggle and bat their eyes and flirt with him, and all the guys would shake his hand and pat him on the back, and I literally would go and hide because I could not form a sentence around him. I was so nervous, which has not happened before or since. And so one day he called me up and he said, "Hey, I need you to bring a file down to my office." And so I did. And I brought that file down to his office, and he took me to lunch, and that was it. I started dating him, and I left my husband. And you need to hear that because that's the order it came in. And I'm not proud of that. And that is not a recommendation, just so you know. But that's what I did. And the reason why I need to be honest about that and tell you that is because I lied about that to a lot of people for a lot of years. Now, I didn't consider it lying. I don't know if you're anybody, and if you're a type like me, I can make anything sound better than it is. And so when somebody would have enough nerve to ask me, which didn't happen often, by the way, but if somebody did ask me about it, I would say, you know what, we were separated long before I started dating him. And we were separated. I was in the kitchen, he was in the garage. We were separated because that's how my mind works. I can make anything better than it is. It's not a total lie, it's just not really the truth. And so that's what I would do. I start dating him, he's crazy. He's just crazy, but he's a lot of fun and he's very exciting. And we have a lot of fun, and we have fun no matter what we do. We have fun watching TV. We have fun talking on the phone. We have fun going to dinner. We have fun no matter what we do. But I have noticed that he's a little crazy. I also notice he doesn't sleep real well, like for days at a time. And then he'll sleep for days at a time. This piques my interest because I've never known anybody to do that because I can't make it through a slumber party. So I asked him about that, and he says, I have a sleeping disorder. I've had it since college. And I said, you need to see somebody about that. And he said, oh, I have. I've gone to doctors and done sleep studies, and they can't figure it out. Now, I don't know what happens when you get information like that, but when I get information like that, I am now going to help you because you are now my project. Here's a little bit of information. He did not ask for my help. When I got here to the rooms, there's a lady in my home group. She still goes to my home group. She was here before me, and she heard this from her sponsor. She passed it on to me, like within my first few meetings. She said, you know, helpfulness is the sunny side of control. So y'all might want to remember that the next time you're being helpful. Okay. when I started dating Cliff, there were people that knew Cliff and knew me, and they would call me up and find out if I was dating him. And this is generally the conversation that was had. I would answer the phone, and they'd say, "Hey, how you doing?" We'd have the small talk. They'd go, "Listen, I need to ask you something. Are you dating Cliff Gooding?" And I'd say, "Yeah, you know him?" And they go, "Oh, yeah." And I'd say, "Well, tell me about him." And they go, "Well, you know, he's smart. He's probably one of the smartest men you'll ever meet. He's brilliant." And I knew that. He did his undergraduate in 3 years. He graduated top 5% in his law school. He was 7th in his class. And they'd say, and he's super successful, and I knew that. He had this huge law firm at the time that I met him, downtown Oklahoma City. And they'd say, and he's a lot of fun. And I knew that. We had had a lot of fun together. And then they'd say this, but he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's arrogant, he's egotistical. You cannot trust him as far as you can throw him, and you need to stay away from him. And what I heard was, he needs you. So we're dating. I'm trying to figure it out. I can't figure out why he's not sleeping, so I move in with him because that's what you do. And and I'm watching and I'm looking and I'm checking stuff and I can't figure it out. And we start having these little arguments. And at first it's no big deal. It's these little spats. They just last a few minutes. And then he comes back and apologizes and we go on about our day. Notice I say he comes back and apologizes because I do not. And then it's no big deal for a while. And then it seems like that the more that I ask questions, the more that I inquire, the more that I try to figure out, the bigger the fights get, the more they happen. And one day, I'm living with him, and we get in a huge fight, and I leave because I kept my apartment because we have to have a backup plan, ladies. Let's be honest. And so I moved back, and it's been about 2 weeks, and he calls me up and he says, "Hey, you know what I think we should do?" And I said, "What?" He said, "I think we should go see a counselor." Now, I had never been to a counselor, but I thought that was a great idea. And I said, "Well, that's fine." And he said, "I'm going to call and make us an appointment." And I said, "Okay." So he calls me up. He says, "She wants to see you by yourself first." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I've got an appointment for you, whatever day." And so I went. Now, I had never been to counselor. I don't know if any of you have ever been to therapy or counseling. I'm looking around the room. Probably not. But perhaps if any of you might have gone to a counselor, I don't know what happened when you went there, but I'm going to tell you what happened when I went there. She gave me this intake sheet to fill out, and it had questions on it like this. Have you ever drank more than 2 or 3 drinks at a time? Have you ever abused prescription drugs? Have you ever taken illegal drugs? Have you ever smoked marijuana? Have you ever had more than 2 sexual partners at a time? Have you ever dressed promiscuously? I am looking at this sheet, checking no as fast as I can check no on every question, thinking, who comes in here? I mean, I just need a little relationship advice. What is all this? That woman looked at that sheet of paper and she said, "I'm going to take this back and study it. Give me about 10 minutes and I'm going to come out and we're going to talk." And I said, "Okay." And she barely got in her office before she flipped right back around, looked at me, and she goes, "Well, looks like the only thing sick about you is that you're dating Cliff Gooding. Let's talk about that." That's what she said. What I heard was, "See, it's him, it's not you. He's the problem." And I'm going to tell you, we went to counseling based on he was the problem. And seems like after a while it kind of leveled out, and then he had convinced her that he was bipolar, and she gave him medication for that. And then we're on the roller coaster ride again. And now when we have these long, huge fights, and now that we're having these knockdown drag-outs, it's because I didn't take the medication. I didn't take the right amount. They have to switch the kind. There's always an excuse. There's always a reason. And now we are having horrible knockdown drag-out fights. We were having a fight, and I worked at a radio station. I worked for several radio stations, and a client called me one time, and Cliff at this time had gotten paranoid and jealous, and he had answered my phone, and it was some client, and it was a guy, and he came out the door to get me. I was outside, and he said, "Your boyfriend's on the phone," in front of my client, and threw my phone up against the wall. That was fun to explain the next day. But those are the kind of things that are happening in our house. And we go to a counseling appointment one day, and he said, "I asked her to marry me a year ago, and and she needs to set a date. And by this time he's telling me, you know, you're going to leave me and you don't love me. So of course I marry him to prove it. And so we get married, and the fights continue, you know. And there's always something in our brains that tell us, people like me, that, okay, if I marry him, it's going to get better. If I do this, it's going to get better. If this happens, we're going to be okay. And none of that worked. And so we're once again in a huge, gigantic fight. Once again, it's getting bad again. And when I just need to explain these fights to you. There are things that I have called my husband that I would not call my worst enemy today. I couldn't treat anybody more horribly than I have treated him. We have said and done things to each other I wouldn't do to my worst enemy. And here's what you need to know about that. At the time that Cliff and I got together, my little boy was 4 and his little girl was 5, and I'm going to tell you, they were up front and center for a lot of those fights. Screaming and yelling and cussing, and they've heard their parents talk and treat each other horribly. And I am not proud of that. But when active alcoholism is alive and well, I will defend anything to control him, to figure it out. And I don't even know what's going on. So Cliff's not a violent man, but you put enough drugs and alcohol into a person, you never know what's going to happen. And on one particular night, we got into a fight. I cannot tell you to this day what it was about. Obviously, it was really important. But we were screaming and yelling at each other, and this time he grabbed me by the hair and he pulls me down the hall. And I'm going to tell you, I grew up with a brother. I'm telling you, I give just as good as I get. I am no victim here. I am a committed volunteer. But I am no victim. And I'm punching and kicking, and he's slapping at me and pulling my hair, and my 8-year-old boy walks out of his room and sees all this because he can hear it. And he walks out and he sees his mother being dragged down the hall. And he's crying and he's scared and he's shaking and he's screaming at us to stop. And the only thing I can say is, go back in your room. Go back in your room. Because that's the kind of parent I am without you people. Because I have no answers. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know what happened, but the next day we got up, everything was just fine. And nobody talked to that little boy. Nobody said to him, hey, listen, I'm sorry about what happened last night. We're really sorry by the way we acted and what we said. Nobody said anything. We never addressed it. And that was the only time that it got physical and that got that bad. But I can tell you there were numerous times there were screaming, horrible fights. And nobody ever explained that to those kids. Nobody ever sat down with that little girl or that little boy and said, hey, you know, I don't know what's going on in this family. We're really sick. I don't know why we act like that. Nobody ever talked about it. We just swept it under the rug and kept going. By this time, it's gotten really bad. Our counselor, who we had seen for 2 years, had enough of us and sent us somewhere else. And this lady, I think it was like our second or third visit there. And once again, Cliff is being up for 2 or 3 days. And once again, I'm pulling my hair out. And she says, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to write you a prescription for tranquilizers. I want you to give him one at 6 o'clock. If he's not asleep by 10, give him another one and you go to bed. And that's what I did. I got up the next morning. He's not in bed with me, which at this time is not an uncommon occurrence. Usually he's asleep in the living room on the couch, or he's in our guest room on the other side of the house. On this particular morning, he was in the guest room on the other side of the house. And I went to go open the door to wake him up, and when I did, it was barricaded shut with a love seat, which had not happened before. That was new. And the other door going in from the bathroom was locked. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're an untreated Al-Anon of my type, a love seat is no barrier for people like us. I'm just going to tell you, if there is an alcoholic somewhere, we will find them, we will retrieve them. It's a gift. He could have been in the middle of Fort Knox. I would have gotten him out. I still think today, I'm just telling you, I'm convinced of this. If you would have told a bunch of untreated Al-Anons that Osama bin Laden was a drunk and his family needed him at home, there would have been no need for military action. Seek, reach, and retrieve is a gift. And I broke in on him. He was passed out, naked to the world. Next to the bed was an empty bottle of vodka and an empty bottle of wine. And up next, he had pulled to up next to the bed a TV, and on top of the adult videotapes that had ran out was a little clear package with some white substance in it. And that's how I found out what was going on. I hit him as hard as I could hit another human being. He bolted up out of that bed. I shook that package at him and I said, "What the heck is this?" May not have been my exact words, but let's just go for it. And I said, "What the heck is this?" He looked at that package. He looked back at me. He goes, "I don't know." On the rare occasion that Cliff gets to tell this story before me, he likes to say, "I guess those people that barricaded me in here must have dropped it on their way out." Another fight ensued, and I told him to leave, and he left, and he came back a couple hours later, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "This is my house. I live here." I go, "Not today." And he said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And I said, "I want you to go tell Wilma what's been going on." Wilma is my stepdaughter and my daughter's mom. And at the time, Wilma was had been in the rooms of AA for about 13 or 14 years. And so Cliff left, and he came back a couple hours later, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I live here." And I said, "Oh my God, he's still drunk. He doesn't remember our conversation." And I said, "No, you're not staying here." And he said, "No, I went and did what you said. I went to Wilma. I told her what was going on. She took me to a meeting, and we're going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I had no earthly idea what he was talking about, and I did not care. And I said, "I don't care. You're not staying here." And he left. And I called Wilma. And I wish I could stand up here today and tell you that I called Wilma because I knew that she had 13 or 14 years in the program of AA and she was going to give me some solid advice. But I called Wilma to check up on him. And she answered the phone and I said, "Did he tell you what's been going on?" And she said, "Yeah." And we went to a meeting and we're going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I still didn't know what she was talking about and I still didn't care. And I said, "Well, that's great. What do I do?" And she said, "Would you be willing to go to a meeting with me tomorrow?" And I said, "Yes." Now I'm going to tell you why I said yes. It's not because I had a problem. It's not because I thought there was anything wrong with me. It's because I was completely out of ideas, pretty much. I tried everything to get him to do and act the way that I thought he should do and act. I've looked through emails. I've checked voicemails. I have followed him. I have looked through cars. I've looked through pockets. I have looked through wallets. I have driven by places where his car is supposed to be. I have followed him. I have stalked him. I've done everything that I could possibly do. I've cried, pleaded, begged, screamed, guilted, shamed, punished. I've done it all. And none of it worked. And so I was pretty much out of ideas. I had one idea left. I was going to kill him. I still think one of the worst things that can happen for untreated Al-Anons of my type is for us to watch too many episodes of Forensic Files and 48 Hours Mysteries. Because we've planned your death so many times you have no idea. And we're pretty sure we're going to get away with it because we've learned from those other people's mistakes. Let's just be honest. So I thought, murder can be a backup plan. So I went to my first meeting. She took me to my first meeting. She took me to my second meeting. And she took me to my third meeting. I don't know how you guys got here. I got here with the ex-wife. And so I started going to meetings. And you know, I was a crazy woman. And 45 days later, Cliff relapsed. And he had been gone for the weekend. He walked in the door. I go, "You've been drinking and using?" He goes, "No, I haven't." I go, "We're going to do a drug test." He's like, "You're being harsh." And I think you're being a little crazy. And once again, we had another fight. Once again, he was asked to leave the house. And once again, I called Wilma. And she said, "You know what I think we should do?" And I said, "What?" She said, "I think we should have supervised visitation with our kids." And I thought that was a great idea. And I wish I could stand up here and tell you that I did that because I wanted to protect my kids because I'm a good mom. I did that to punish him. You drink at me, I'll show you. You relapse on me, I'll teach you. So we go the next day to see this attorney who happens to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, when I walked in the door and we started talking, she said, "Do you want a divorce?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, what do you want?" And I said, "I just want him to be okay." And she said, "Well, if that's true, if that's what you mean, and you really mean that, you need to decide what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And you need to be really sure of it." And after you decide and after you're sure of it, you need to go talk to him. And by the way, you don't say anything that you're not willing to follow through with. And you don't threaten. And she said, and when you do that, you need to be really calm. Now, I'm just going to tell you, there are 1,000 adjectives that can describe me. Calm ain't making the list. I've never been calm in my life. I thrive on chaos. That's my wheelhouse. Crisis and chaos, I'm your girl. Calm, got nothing. I don't know how to do calm. I don't even know what that means. But I've been going to Al-Anon, and for 45 days, the only thing that had sunk into this thick skull was the Serenity Prayer. And so, like I said, I had a really good job. I was driving around in my car all day, and I just said the Serenity Prayer over and over again. And I promise you, if I said it once, I said it 500 times that day. And I called Cliff and I asked him to meet me at home, and he did. And when I came in the door, I grabbed his hands and I said, I know you must be scared, and I know that this is hard, but I know you have a problem. And I'm willing to do whatever I need to do. If I need to go to counseling or treatment or therapy or whatever I got to do, meetings, whatever I got to do, I'm willing to do my part. But only if you can do your part. And if you can't do your part, I can't stay. And that may not sound like a big deal to you, but I'm going to tell you it was everything to me. Because until that moment in that time, I have never felt okay being me. I've never felt okay in my own skin. I've never been pretty enough, smart enough, rich enough, whatever enough, ever. I've never been okay without him. I've always had to have him, whether it's him or the him before him or the him before him. I've never been okay by myself. But when I said that, I knew in my soul, in my gut, and in my heart, no matter what he said, I was going to be okay. I finally knew it. For the first time since I was a little girl, I felt okay. I knew that if he said, screw you, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and if you don't like it, there's the door. I knew it was going to be fine. But that's not what he said. He said, you're right. I have a problem. And I knew he was going to AA. He also let me know that he was not bipolar and did not have a sleeping disorder, which was really nice to hear, but I kind of figured it out. But and I said, well, what are you going to do differently? Because I knew he'd been going to AA. And he said, I'm going to ask Amanda to sponsor me tomorrow, and I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. And I knew he meant it. I knew there was something different with him. And the next day he got up and he went to that meeting and he asked that man to sponsor him, and he's been sober ever since. And that left me with me. And when the obsession in my life starts getting better and I am just going to meetings, I get crazier. And I'm going to tell you, here's what's going on in our house. Everything that they tell you not to do in Al-Anon, I did. Every single thing. So when he came in, he would come in the door, and I promise you, this is kind of what it was like. What did you do today? How many meetings have you been to? Who did you go with? Did you talk to your sponsor today? Did he go with you? Where did you guys go for lunch? How much money did you spend? What did you order? What did you eat? What did they eat? Have you talked to your sponsor tonight? Are you going to a meeting tonight? Who's going with you? I gave you $20. How much do you have left? Because he's going to relapse, I'm going to catch him and I'm going to punish him, because that's what I do. And I'm going to meetings, and I am sharing this in meetings. And I love Al-Anon. I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why I love Al-Anon. When you first come into the rooms, they know you're crazy. And they know that this is the first time that you can say all this stuff, and it's okay. It's the first safe place. And they let you talk you're crazy for a while. They do. And I'm telling them what's going on in our house. I'm telling them about, he's not drinking, but he's going on, I'm waiting, and blah, blah, blah. And he went to 3 meetings yesterday, and I talked to a sponsor, and we'd get in a fight. I'd call his sponsor because I didn't have one. So I'm sharing this in the meetings, and like I said, they're just like, keep coming back. Please come back. Finally, after about 2 or 3 months, which I think I have figured out is pretty much the cutoff point for crazy, they go, do you have a sponsor? And I was like, oh, probably need to get one of those. So there's a lady that went to like 2 or 3 meetings a week with me. And every time that she shared, I felt like she could read my mind. I mean, it was eerie. And she would, every time that she talked, I'd think, oh my God, how does she know that? It was just one of those. So one day she is leaving the meeting, and I follow her out, and I said, I really need a sponsor. Would you sponsor me? And she said, sure. Here's my number. Call me tonight. And so I did. And, she was so lovely and kind, and I just loved her. And I called her that night, and she said, well, tell me why you think you need Al-Anon. So I told her everything he'd ever done. He did this, and he did that, and he went, no, and then I caught him with this, and I went on and on about him. And she finally stopped me, and she goes, well, now we know he's not the problem, you are. Let's talk about that. She seemed so nice in those meetings, too. And I'm going to tell you what that did for me. It's exactly what I needed to hear, and it's exactly the way I needed to hear it. God knew exactly who to put in my life. Had I heard it any other way, I don't think it would have worked. But when she said that to me, it clicked in my brain. Oh my God, I am powerless over alcohol, and my life is unmanageable by me. It had nothing to do with him. He was getting better. He was doing everything he was supposed to be doing. He was going to meetings. He was talking with his sponsor. He was working the steps. He was working with newcomers. He was doing service work. He was doing whatever I was asked to be done of him, and I was getting crazier. And she said, we're going to work these steps, and we started, and we identified the powerless and unmanageability in my life. And then we got to step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves had restored us to sanity, and I'd always believed in God. I grew up in church. It was not a problem for me. But I was not insane. He was insane. Apparently you all weren't paying attention. He was insane, not me. And she said to me, do you know what the definition of insanity is? And I said no. And she said, it's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that clicked with me, and I'll tell you why. All those things that I told you that I'd done to try to get him to do and act the way that I tried to get him to do and act, the begging, the pleading, the crying, the threatening, the following him, all that stuff, every single time that I did any one of those things, every single time, I thought, this is the day he's going to hear it. This is the time it's going to work. This is the time that he's going to understand what I'm trying to say to him. It's going to be this time. And that was not a few times. That was hundreds and hundreds of times that I thought it was going to be different. And then we got to step 3, and she said, do you trust God? And I said, yeah. She goes, no, you don't. No, you don't. And I was like, of course I do. She said, no, you don't, honey. You've been trying to do his job your whole life. And she was right. She said, when's the last time you gave anything to God and just let him take care of it, and you didn't try to manage, manipulate, figure it out, convert somebody, do something to get your way? Tell me when the last time that happened. And I had nothing. The only thing I could think of is when my son was born, when he was 3 days old, he had to have open heart surgery. Gave that to God. Had I been a surgeon, probably not. It's the only time that God got anything from me is when I was out of any other options or ideas. She said, we're going to start practicing trusting God, and you're going to do this 3rd step every morning on your knees, and you're going to give your day to God. And when you find yourself trying to take over, you're going to give it back. And I don't care if you have to do it 5,000 times. You're going to start practicing trusting God. And so I started doing that, and she said, get ready and write your 4th step, and I did that. I got done with my 4th step. I called her. I said, I'm ready to do my 5th step. She said, great. Be at my house Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. We're going to do your 5th step. And I said, okay. At the time, we were remodeling our kids' rooms, and the only thing left to do in our daughter's room was to get her bedding. It was fall break. It was on a Friday. I was at work. Cliff was at home. He called me up, and he said, guess what we did today? And I said, what? And he said, we went and got Rachel's bedding. And I thought, how dare you? How dare you do that without my approval, my input, my consent, whatever? I didn't say that because I had a sponsor. I just said, okay, and I hung up the phone, and I went home that evening, and I said, show me what you got. And they brought it out to the kitchen, and they showed me. And I said, you know what? This color doesn't match her room. And this material is so thin, she's going to tear it up in no time. And I said, and you spent way too much money on this. And, he was trying to do a kind, decent thing, and I ripped him to shreds for it, and I did it in front of his daughter. Next day, I got up, and I took that stuff, and I threw it in the trunk of my car because I know better. I'm taking it back because I know better. And I went to go do my 5th step. Yeah, it doesn't end well. I'm just going to tell you. And so I get there. I hadn't gotten very far, and she stops me to go get a drink, and she comes back in the room, and she says, now listen, is there anything that's not on this 5th step that has happened that you want to talk about? And I thought, oh my God, he called her. And I said, yes. And she said, what is it? And I told her about the bedding. And she said, do you know what you did when you did that? And I said, yes, once again, I had to be in control and I had to be right and I had to have my way. And she said, oh, no, that's not what you did. When you told her that color didn't match her room, you told her her opinion didn't matter. And when you told her that that material was so thin she'd tear it up in no time, you let her know that no matter what decision she made for the rest of her life, you would always know better. And when you told her it was too expensive, you told her she wasn't worth it. You see, those are the exact nature of my wrongs. It's not the big stuff that I can see. It's not the big things, the controlling and all that, which is bad enough. But it's those little things that do all the damage to all the people that I love every single day. And I've never given it a thought. We went back through my fifth step and we identified the exact nature of my wrongs in every area of my life, with every relationship, with the things that I had said to people and the actions that I had done that causes the damage. When I got done with that fifth step, I was both elated and horrified at the same time. It is now clear to me who I am and what I am and all the stuff that I have said and done and all the damage that I have caused. And it's sickening, frankly. But I also know that there's a way out and that there's some new tools, and I don't have to be that person anymore. I had no problem with being entirely ready, I will just tell you. My first fifth step, I was entirely ready after that. Entirely ready. I did not want to be that person anymore. She said, honey, you don't have to change anything. You have to change everything. And she said, but it's going to take you a while. It's not going to happen overnight. It took you a lot of years to get this big of a knot. We're going to have some time for God to untie it. She sent me home to do 6 and 7. I took an hour. I reviewed and made sure I didn't leave anything out. I got on my knees. We went over my character defects. I got on my knees again and did the 7-step prayer and asked God to remove those defects of character. I made my 8-step list. We went over that and I started making my amends. When I divorced my husband, he did not want a divorce, and he told me that if I divorced him, he was going to do whatever he could to make me pay, and he did. He got custody of our 4-year-old little boy. And I'm going to tell you, I thought it was the most horrible thing that could happen. I was mad at him. I was mad at God. I was mad at the world. How dare you take my child away from me? And what I realized by doing that 4th and 5th step and going through these steps is that that little boy had seen enough horrors on the weekends. I can't imagine what it had been like had he been with me full time. He should have been taken away from me. He would absolutely have been taken away from me, and should have been had he been with me full time. And what I saw is that God put him in a loving, kind home, that he was a pretty good dad, and he was in a good school district, and he was happy. And so one day, I don't know if I was picking up or dropping off, I asked his dad if I could talk to him, and I'm sure he was thinking, oh no, what now? Because I had not been real kind to him in the years. And what I said to him was, I just want to thank you for doing such a good job with Colby. You're a good dad, and you've done a good job, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate it. He turned white. I was pretty sure he was going to pass out in the parking lot, so I left. I got about 5 minutes down the road, and he called me, and he said, I can't tell you what that means to me. I didn't think I'd done a very good job. I sure as heck didn't think you thought that. Somehow after that, he got better. And when I got kicked out of that house when I was 16, I didn't talk to my mother for 3 years. And I got to be honest, I hadn't talked to her much since then. And my sponsor made me start emailing her once a week. And so I started doing that. And then she made me start calling her once a week. And I started doing that. And I don't know how long it had been. It had been a while I was doing that. And she brought up one night on the phone, and she brought it up, not me, about how I was raised. And she said to me, I can't tell you how many times I've cried myself to sleep for the things that I allowed happen to you and the way you were raised and the way that I treated you. And I said, well, Mom, you need to learn to forgive yourself because I've forgiven you a long time ago. And it was the truth. And I can't even tell you when it happened. My mom is still alive. She is 90 years old. A year or so ago, I was talking to her on the phone, and she's a mess. She has not changed. Let me just say, she has not changed, but she's a mess. So she was talking to me on the phone, and I don't know how the subject got brought up, something about the vaccine, getting vaccinated. And by the way, I don't care. Get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. I do not care. Do not come up to me. I don't care. And so do whatever you got to do. But my mom asked me about it, and she said, did you get vaccinated? And I said, yeah. And she said, oh, you did? And I said, yeah, kidney disease. My doctor kind of insisted on it. And she was like, oh, okay. And so I was talking to her, and then it just kind of dawned on me. I go, well, Mom, now at the time she's 89, she's 90 now. I said, Mom, I go, did you not get vaccinated? And she goes, no, I'm not going to. I go, okay. Again, don't care, your choice. Then I thought about it a minute. I go, Mom, just out of curiosity, why are you not getting vaccinated? She goes, I'm worried about the long-term effects. This is where I came from. I'm just saying. But you know what? I love my mom, and she knows she can depend on me, and she knows if she needs anything, she can count on me, and I keep in touch with her, and I try to do the best I can to take care of her whatever she needs, whenever she needs. She has not changed. It's not her job to be a good mom. It's my job to be a good daughter. My sponsor taught me that. I can't change her. I did the rest of my amends and got through those, and 10, 11, and 12 is really just where I live and grow. I try to keep my side of the street clean so I can look at anybody in the eye, and I can look myself in the eye. I love prayer and meditation. I do it every single morning. It's that I grow that relationship with my God, which is the most important relationship I have. And 12 is doing this service works in whatever message I can carry to whoever I can carry, whenever I can carry it, and practicing these principles in all my affairs. My dad died a month before I got in this program. And I had no unfinished business with my dad, and I'm so grateful for that, because I know that is not everybody's case, but I didn't. I was a good daughter to him, and I had said and done everything, and he had said and done everything that we needed to say to each other. And at the time that he died, I was having dinner at his house every Wednesday night with him and my stepmom. And after he died, my stepmom asked me, she said, are you still going to come out for dinner on Wednesday nights? And I said, of course I am. And she said, oh, I'm so glad. I was afraid you wouldn't. And I'm thinking, it's a free home-cooked meal. And it was me and my son. And so we continued to do that. And after about 5 years after my dad died, my stepmom met a man, and his name is Herschel. And my stepmom is about 5'11". She's got silver white hair. She's strong as an ox. She looks like the former women's Tennessee basketball coach, Pat Summitt. If you look up Pat Summitt, she kind of looks like that. And she's real tall and skinny. And she said, listen, I'm going to have Herschel come Wednesday night to dinner. I want you to meet him. And I said, okay. She said, now listen, I need to tell you something. And I said, okay. She said, he's only about 5'6". I go, Mom, you may not have noticed, but I'm okay with that. And sure enough, I meet Herschel. He's 5'6", dark skin, baby blue eyes, great smile, sweetest man. And I took my stepmom to New York. She always wanted to go to New York, so we came to New York, and we went on a vacation together for about a week. And I took her around, and we were walking around, and I said, I never thought you'd get married again, but I could see you marrying Herschel. And she goes, I could too. And a few months after that, she called me. And I answered the phone, and she said, hey, I need to talk to you about something. And I said, you're getting married, aren't you? And she said, not if you're not ready. I know how much Daddy meant to you, and if this is too much or if this is too soon, I can wait. I know, isn't that sweet? I said, Mom, don't ever give me that much power again. I said, my daddy would have loved Herschel, and he would want you to be happy, and he would not want you to be alone, and I think that's great. And they got married. And 5 years after they got married, my stepmom got sick. She's never been sick a day in her life. I am not kidding you. That other than a cold or something, she's never been sick. She's a strong woman. And she got sick, and she'd been in the hospital, and they called me and told me to get to the emergency room, and I got there. And anyway, found out she had organized pneumonia in her lungs. And she was in the hospital for like 10 days, and that was in late September, 1st of October. And then she got sent home, and then in November she had to go back. And then she got sent home, and she was at Thanksgiving riding her horse across the pasture. And then she was home at Christmas time, and then in January she got sent back to the hospital again. She just seemed like there was something going on. She couldn't fight it. And I went to go see her at the hospital in January, and she was doing good. They'd taken her off the full oxygen, put her back on the nose cannula, and she was doing good. And we were talking. It was Monday. I'd been there for a couple of hours. It was about 5 o'clock, and she said, "Don't you have a meeting to go to?" Because she knew when my home group met. And she loved Al-Anon, and she loved AA. She had seen the changes that had happened with Cliff and I, and she loved you people. She had come to hear me speak. She had seen us, and she loved you people. And she said, "Don't you have a meeting to go to?" And I said, "You know what, Mom, I can skip it tonight." And she said, "No, you need to go." And she said to me something that she says to me every single time we leave each other. She says, "Don't forget that I love you." And I said, "I won't. I love you too." And she said, "Always remember." And I said, "I will." And I went to my home group that night. That Saturday morning, I got up, and some friends and I were training, and I'd ran 6 miles. I don't do that anymore. Sanity has returned. But I ran 6 miles, and then Cliff and I went to a basketball game in Stillwater, and I came home, and we were going to a meeting that night with some friends and a dinner. And I was exhausted, and I said, "Give me a 15-minute power nap, and I'll be good to go." And he said, "Okay." And I laid down, and the phone rang, and it was Herschel. And I answered the phone, and he said, "Your mom's gone." And I wasn't expecting that. My stepmom had passed away, and the next day, I went out to their house, and the day before, when my stepmom insisted on sleeping in her room at the top of the stairs. And by the time that she would climb the stairs, she literally would collapse in bed. And so Herschel had gotten a chairlift put in, and it had gotten installed the day before she went to the hospital. And I don't know why I asked this. It was just Herschel and I. It's not something I usually care about or would even think about. But for some reason I said, "Herschel, how much did that chairlift cost?" And he said, "I don't know, like $2,700. And I looked at him and I said, "And she got to use it one time." And without skipping a beat, he looked me square in the eye and he said, "It was worth it." And that taught me this. No matter what I've done in my life, no matter what pain I've caused others, and no matter what has been done to me, if it got me to you, it was worth it. I would not change 1 second of my life. I would not do one thing differently if it was going to cost me being here, because this is where I got God, and that God has given me so much. I would not change a thing. I would not change one thing. Everything that I am today and the person that I am today is because of you. I'm the mom that I am today. I'm the wife that I am today. I'm the sister, the friend, the coworker, everything because of you. That was a horrible year that year. We had a family tragedy, and she died in January. In February, we had a family tragedy. In March, we had like 2 weeks' notices to move our whole offices 6 floors, and then my sons had a wreck the next month, and he totaled his truck, and he was fine, but he wanted me to give him the insurance check, and I wouldn't do it. And I said, "No, you can go get a vehicle, and I'm happy to pay this much and even more if you need, but you're not getting this check." And he got mad at me, and he left, and he wouldn't talk to me. And I started calling him on the phone. He wouldn't answer. I'd text him. He wouldn't text me back. I was furious. It's like I'd never been in an Al-Anon meeting. I was doing stuff like, "By God, I pay for this phone. I'll shut it off. You don't call me mister." And spiritual guru that I am. And then, you get desperate. You call your sponsor. And she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." And I said, "Okay." And I'm going to tell you, when I told you I did absolutely everything wrong when I got to Al-Anon, I will tell you the one thing that I did right is I've always listened to my sponsor, and I've always followed her guidance every single time. And she always had good stuff. So I listened up. I was like, "Okay, she's got a plan. I love it." She said, "Yeah, we're going to leave him alone." I didn't like that plan. I thought, this is the time. She's lost it. I even said, it's Colby, not Cliff. And she's like, "Yeah, I heard you. Leave him alone." And I was like, okay. 3 months went by. I hadn't heard from my son. At the end of 3 months, my sponsor said, "Have you heard from Colby?" And I go, "No." And she said, okay, here's what you can do. You can get a card and it can say, I love you and I miss you, Mom. That is it. Because she knows me. She knows what I'll do. So I got a card and I wrote, I love you and I miss you, Mom. At the time, my sponsee, her best friend's husband, worked with my son. We were at our home group on Monday at 5:30. I handed her the card. I said, do you think you can get this to Colby? She said, yeah. Next morning, I'm at the office. It's 10 o'clock, and my phone starts blowing up from text from Colby. Mom, I'm sorry. I really miss you, and I miss Cliff. I was just really angry, and I would really like to see you. Do you think we can get together for dinner? I was so excited. So I called my sponsee. I go, so you got Colby the card? And she goes, no, it's still in my car. And that's how God shows up in my life. Sometimes he shows up, sometimes he shows out. And I'm supposed to follow direction and get out of the way and let him do the rest. And for some reason, for some days, I forget that. My son joined the Army when he was 27 years old and did not tell me. And I don't mean that he went to the recruiter station, came home and said, guess what, I'm joining the Army. I mean he was in boot camp when I found out. I had been calling him and his phone kept going to voicemail, and finally called his dad and he said, yeah, he joined the Army. And I told him to tell you. And anyway, I found out through a post on Facebook to a group that I'm not a part of. I might have been doing a little research, I'm just saying. But nonetheless. And I walked around for 2 days thinking, why would he not tell you you're his mom? Why wouldn't he tell you he was joining the Army? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Why would he tell you he was joining the Army? You've been trying to run his life his whole life, and every time that he made a decision that you didn't like or approve of, you let him know. And every time that he made a decision that you thought he was a mistake or that he didn't know what he was doing, you let him know. Why would he tell you? And that's exactly what it was. He wrote me a letter. I got it, and it said stuff like this. Mom, I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you, but I didn't want our last conversation to be a fight. And I'm sorry if you're disappointed in me, because sometimes I'm disappointed in myself. And I hope you understand that I had to make this decision for myself. And if you never want to speak to me again, I'll accept that, but I love you. And it was the saddest and sweetest letter. And I got to write him back, and I got to take full responsibility for that. I was not a safe mother, a safe person to tell that he had joined the Army. And I got to tell him that I was very proud of him and how much I loved him. He called me that next weekend. I said, did you get my letter? And he said, yeah. And I said, is there anything else that I need to say or do to make this right? He said, no, Mom, I think we're good. I go, well, let me just say this. If you ever are forced into a situation where you think you have to disappoint me or disappoint you, you need to disappoint me every single time. And he and I are good today. He and I have a great relationship today. He actually calls and wants my opinion. It is the craziest thing. And I don't give it, which is great. So, Al-Anon working. There was a couple back home, Jack and Hody Mitchell. They were an American Indian couple. Jack died with 42 years of sobriety, and Hody died with 36 years of sobriety, and Hody was also a member of Al-Anon. They were a great example of what a couple in recovery should be, and we loved them. And Hody went to an American Indian meeting in Arizona, and she learned this prayer, and she brought it back to us. And there's a few of us that know it, and every time we're asked to close with the Lord's Prayer, we lead off with this prayer first, and it goes like this. I've been told the reason we join hands is to remind us of the truth that we are no longer alone. Our prayers for the still suffering alcoholics in these rooms and on the streets. Hold on to the person's hand next to you like your life depends on it, because someday it may. Thank you for holding my hand and allowing me to hold yours.